another foundering car, and today we will discuss 35 years of Mazda MX-5, Mazda Miata, Mazda Eunos Roadster. It's all the same, different names for different markets. And why is this so special? I ask you one thing. Can you imagine sports cars that have a history of 35 years continuously? There are some. So one example is the Mazda MX-5, Miata, Eunos Roadster, but the other one is the 911 from Porsche, and from Chevrolet you have the Corvette, for example. Yeah? But they are very limited. Even if you look at brand names like Lotus for the Elise, they are not there for 35 years. Same with Esprit, not 35 years. If I'm thinking this through, this is quite a feature. And the other thing is, if you look at the 911 or the Corvette, they are not cars for everyone, every day. But the Mazda MX-5, Miata, Eunos Roadster, but if I say MX-5, it is applying to all those variants, of course, for different markets. And the thing is, it is accessible. So even on the entry-level sports car, you will find this fine vehicle. And the power range from, I think, in the beginning 90 horsepower at the lowest iteration to now 186 horsepower, which is quite a lot. And almost all Mazda MX-5s had a naturally aspirated engine. There were some specials. The Mazda Speed versions, for example, they had a turbo. I think a 1.8 turbo. So they also keep that original sense lively. It's even more special if you consider that Lotus Elan is like an ancestor to the Mazda MX-5. So Lotus stopped producing the Elan, and Mazda took over that candle with a car that's really, especially the first generation, the NA generation, looked the part, but a little bit more roomy, a little bit easier to drive, so more accessible, cheaper, and a lot more reliable. So now you have a car that is a sports car that's as reliable as your runabout, like a Mazda 3. And in the beginning they called them the 323, and now they call it the Mazda 3. But it's very interesting that you could have a car with quite similar running costs, albeit being a lot more sporty, a lot more fun. And what made the Mazda MX-5 so much fun and still makes it so much fun, it's quite easy, because it is a car that has rear wheel drive, it has double wishbone setup, so both in front and in the back. And a double wishbone is a setting that you see in the past also with manufacturers like Honda for Civics and Accords. But an accessible car, this is quite a special feat to consider. But it had it, and it still does. And even if you compare it now to, for example, the GT86 or GR86, the next evolution thereof of Toyota, they don't have that very nice, sophisticated setup that the Mazda MX-5 does have. So in its principle, it is a more elite car in the components. That being said, you might get a better deal if you're after rear-wheel drive fun with a Toyota GR86 than with a Mazda MX-5, if you consider it for the euros or dollars spent. But that's another consideration, because Toyota is an enormous player with enormous amounts of money and parts available. And now with that new head Toyota, they are also reintroducing driving pleasure. And driving pleasure is something that the Mazda MX-5 oozes of. So it's a very capable package. It's also looking a lot prettier. I really like the Mazda MX-5, the current generation, the ND. I like it over all the other generations. I understand that the NA has a classical beauty like the Renault Ceylon with also the pop-up headlights, but I like the more aggressive stance of the ND, which is also a little bit wider, and they had reintroduced lightness. So the NC was a little bit heavier, the NB was just a very heavy workaround of the NA, you could say. So just a little bit heavier, but a lot better. And then came the NC, and when the NC was there, still my heart was with the NB, so the second generation. But the ND hits a home run. So they have kept the 2-liter engine there, but even more horsepower now in the latest iteration from 160, where the ND started with and was also in the NC, to now 186, but it's lighter. It's as light as the NA and B with all the new technology fitted, which is a masterpiece. I'm now sitting in Suzuki Swift Sport of the third generation of the Swift Sport, and this is the lightest of all, with better technology, more power, etc, etc. So this is also the reason why I bought this one instead of a car that becomes heavier and heavier with each iteration. And it's fantastic because all the safety features are in there, but still it's lighter. And that lightness is in the mantra of Lotus. Colin Chapman, he said, add lightness. So by keeping things simple, if possible, you could have a car that is very nimble, good acceleration because of the lightness, but also good braking, good turning capacity, and all those things will also mean less wear and tear. You don't need as big of components because the lightness is still quite humble. If you consider this, the thing is, he said, if you want a car that is fast in a straight line at horsepower or torque, that's what gets the car going. But if you want to have a car that's fast everywhere, have it light. So a light car still accelerates faster with the same horsepower than a heavier car. This is simple. It also brakes better than a car with similar brakes and is heavier. That's also simple. It also turns better because it's lighter than a similar car that is heavier. That's all so simple, but it also will result in less wear and tear, less fuel consumption, less maintenance, less replacement, and all those things are very important. And then you have the Netherlands that punish you if you have a heavy car. So you get road tax, for example, based on the weight of your car. So they tax you based on the weight of the car. So if the car is lighter, you also get less tax, which is a benefit in itself. And if you look at insurance companies, there are two components. One is the components to protect the car and to get that reimbursed if you have damages, your own car. And the other one is for your environment. So for example, if you hit another car, it depends how much damage will you do to the other car at a maximum. So if you have a lighter car, also those taxes for the insurance taxes or the insurance cost, it's not a tax, it's a cost, but it is also not something that you can just have optional. You are obliged to have at least the coverage for your environment if you do something wrong there. So it's very, very interesting that all those things combined make a car so much cheaper to run and more fun as a result. So therefore I really love light cars, and the Mazda MX-5 is a lot lighter than a Corvette or the 911. The Corvette and 911 will give you goosebumps in all kinds of different ways, or a real sports cars. The MX-5 is more of an entry-level sports car. But hey, here's a sports car there to give you the best performance. Then it is not your pick. This is the sports car that gives you fun. That is always giving that a sporting nudge. This is also not a sports car, this is Suzuki Swift, but this is a car that gives you fast A to B transport. Yeah, the Mazda MX-5 can also do that, but also involves you and gives you a lot of smiles per mile. And that is where this little car, the Suzuki Swift Sport, but also Mazda MX-5 is shining. So you have a car that does not perform at top level, of course, like a 911 and Corvette do, but it does give you a lot of fun, and it is a very big benefit in itself, especially in a modern society, and I will explain why. Because you still have the fun, as with that faster cars, but there is a trick, and the trick is, because that fun, you can still rev the engine and work through the gears without going stupidly fast on the public roads. So you don't need to go to a circuit to really exploit the chassis and still have quite a lot of fun. Of course, on the circuit you can go a little bit further, but then those 911s and Corvettes will be faster, of course. The other thing is, because doing so you can have fun or exploit like 8/10 of the potential a lot more than you could do with a 911 or that Corvette, which you will probably most of the time that you have 8 out of 10 amount of how you say that, reserves or levels covered. You will have perhaps only 4 out of 10 with the 911, which is very capable, very fast, or that Corvette. So even at mundane speeds you will have a lot more involvement, and that's something that a lot of cars are lacking of. So also the Mazda MX-5, of course, is an open car, convertible, roadster, whatever ticks your box. They have different varieties as well. Some even come as more of a fastback, that you still have the end remaining, and then you have this roof be electronically or otherwise like a Targa, that you can remove pieces of it, and that's very nice. And there are also some competitors, of course. There was Fiat Barchetta, but only one generation and very limited. You have the Mazda, I think it is AZ Roadster, that also has, but it was a K car, and also only one generation, was originally a Suzuki Sciarra. The Cappuccino was there, but also from Mazda, but also only one generation. And you have, of course, Toyota with midship Roadster 2-seater, the MR2 as we call it, or some markets call it the MRS. But it's only a few generations. I think they had 3 real generation, but never continuously 35 years, as it was the case with the Mazda MX-5. So they cover quite a big lifespan, but not as long as the Mazda MX-5, and not as continuously. It's still the halo car. And another thing I really like about Mazda is that they keep producing these little Mazda MX-5. I also liked it with Suzuki, that they keep producing the Swift, and they had a little bit discontinuation because they had the Ignis, which was called the Swift still in Japan, to cover it, and now they have the Ignis and Swift next to each other, and the Swift is back. But the Swift Sport, for example, they promised that they would bring another Swift Sport, but they will not bring it for the European markets. And I think the Mazda MX-5, the new iteration, will still be brought to the European markets, but it's becoming a costly little beast altogether, so that's a pity. In the Netherlands, for a new Mazda MX-5, it's not a weird thing that you have to pay 40,000 euros. Yeah, you heard me correctly, 40,000 euros, and you don't get a well-spec'd one at that. You get an entry-level Mazda MX-5, which is stupendous. In old-time money, when we still had the guldens in the Netherlands, that would be almost 90,000 guldens. In the past you could buy a house for that. And this little guy, the Suzuki Swift, is now 30,000 euros new, the Swift Sport, and I bought it a few years ago for 25,000 euros. So it's getting more costly and more costly, especially because in the Netherlands you get a CO2 tax. So new cars are taxed to get a penalty based on the amount of CO2 that they could use per 100 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers, whatever. But that is a very big pity for a lot of driving enthusiasts. For example, on a new 911, you will not be hard pressed that you will find that a new 911 you will have like 70, 60, 70, 80,000 perhaps. 80,000, 60 to 80,000 or even more additional tax based on the CO2 that they could propel into the atmosphere, which is quite stupendous. For that 80,000 euros you could even buy 2 MX5s, including that tax. So it's all relatively, but it is a big thing, because I started this video that the Mazda MX5, Miata, Eunos Roadster was an accessible car, and in many markets it's still quite accessible. Of course, there is indexation, and that makes things a lot more costly. But in the Netherlands we have so enormous additional costs layered on top of that, that it's making a lot of cars inaccessible. So if the cost of living is already very high compared to a lot of other countries, and the wages are not higher than other countries that are of the similar Western society, but you have enormous costs to buy a car and to maintain it, maintenance costs, but also fuel is extremely expensive here, and then you have the insurance costs, which are also a lot higher, because they have to take into consideration as well that additional tax, if they want to replace it. It will make it very hard. Also, if you want to park a car in the Netherlands, oftentimes you have to have parking fees, and those parking fees are also insane, extremely expensive. So all in all, it makes it a lot harder to drive a car. But you could also turn it around. If you buy a car for 20,000 euros, for example, and you still have to pay the same road tax, as I mentioned in my introduction, or same parking tax as you would do with a Mazda MX-5, it's a lot more fun and costs twice the amount to begin with. Then it might be even relatively sense cheaper. In the total cost of ownership, that would place a smaller dent in relative sense, in absolute sense the same, than a cheaper car. So cheap car or expensive car, some parts are similar in cost. So that's something to consider as well. I really like the Mazda MX-5 because it's very playful. So you have rear wheel drive, so the car is pushing you instead of pulling you. Let's say this car is a front wheel drive car, and it gives a different sensation. Being pushed feels a lot different than being pulled, and also the intendance, the intonation, or the, how do you say that? Intention of the car. That's the word I was searching for. The intention of the car is more to go to oversteer instead of understeer, and the front wheel drive car is more directed to understeer. It is basic, but now with all this modern trickery, they also have like electronic limited slip differentials, etc. So it's just electronic aids or helpers that can make your car turn in a lot nicer, even if you're a front wheel drive car. And on the other way, they make rear wheel drive cars a lot safer, because of course with oversteer you have a bigger chance of accidents, and that is then be taken care of by other safety features. So of course in some cars, especially enthusiast cars, you are able to turn those things off if you would like to, which makes the Mazda MX-5 a very playful little thing. Yes, indeed. And that is still very fun, but a lot of times people keep that safety features on, and or even if you start up the new car new, it is on as a standard default. So it takes a little bit away of the playful nature. And of course you can push through all the buttons or work your way to the menu and still solve it. Yes, you can, but it's are additional things that you need to do to access that playful nature. And the front wheel drive setup gives you a lot more space and practicality, which I like more than a rear wheel drive setup, to be honest. I'm not saying that the rear wheel drive setup is not very much fun, because it is, but a front wheel drive lightweight car is also extremely fun. And keep into consideration that you can have a car that is lighter if you have a front wheel drive setup, because you have less parts that are part of the driving system, and the less parts that you have, the lesser things that add weight or draw away power, parasitic loss they call that. So you generate power at the engine, but for example with a Mazda MX-5 you have a drive shaft that goes through the entire length of the car to get the power from the front where the engine is sitting to the rear where the wheels are being driven, and then at the rear they propel the wheels to be pushing you. Whereas with the front wheel drive setup, it's the engine in front, but also the driven wheels are in front. So you have a lot less components, a lot less weight, and a lot less channels that you have to channel through, so that it improves the power being given to the wheel, so you have less losses, but also reduces friction. So if you want to go the same speed, you have a better fuel economy, and you have a lot more room because you don't have a tunnel going through your car, and that intrusion is being left, and therefore you have a car that is optimal in my sense. Also, please keep in mind that the front wheel drive car was a later evolvement as compared to the rear wheel drive car. And why do you think they placed that engine at the front? Because they have cooling. They want to have the driving wind, the air flow, cool the engine with the radiator in the past, but also now for intercoolers. This is something that is of importance. So even a Porsche 911, which has the engine at the back and also the wheels being driven at the back, has those cooling components at the front, and also has some additional gills to cool down the engine. So the engine at the front is not a bad thing. Another thing to take into consideration, also when the engine in the front, you have more protection because the highest chance that you come into contact with another car or an object is from the front, because you drive that direction. So it also offers additional safety features. So if the engine is already at the front, then you can have a car that is being driven with the front wheels in the optimal sense. Also, if you have a car with rear wheel drive, the engine has to be placed in the longitudinal direction to drive it, the rear wheels, whereas it can place in this direction if you drive the front wheel. So the car can be a lot more compact, so also lighter there, and more simple. And also you can have shorter overhangs, so that the room in front of the front wheels and at the back and after the rear wheels can be reduced, and that reduction gives also a lot more playful nature. And therefore the standard recipe of a hot hatch is front wheel drive, and hot hatches are very, very fun car, I will tell you that. If you only are allowed to have one car, then a hot hatch will be a very good bet. Also, a power station wagon is a very good bet. Even more practical, even more roomier. A little bit less playful because the additional bulk, but can also be a lot more powerful. The thing is, of course, that a power station is more costly to begin with than a hot hatch is. But those are the most practical driver cars that there are if you only are limited to one car. If you have multiple options, of course, a Ferrari or a Porsche or whatever could be a very good bet. But this little car weighs a lot less than a Porsche 911, but offers 5 seating arrangements for even 5 adults at a pinch, whereas you will be hard pressed to put 4 persons into a Porsche, because at the back you have at the front you will sit very nicely, so the 2 at the front are very great, but it's a 2+2 instead of a 5-seater. So 2 seats at the front, it's also not a 4-seater because of the 2+2, but at the back there are compromised seats, so they are very short, a little bit leg room and also limited at the headroom, so as a result it's more suited for children instead of adults. It's not suited for adults. But this little car weighs a lot less, offers 5 adults space at a pinch, and offers very nice performance. Not as nice as the 911 of course, but you can exploit this to 8 or 910, whereas the 911 the same speed you will only be driving 4 out of 10. So in the real life, what is the more fun car? Of course there are bragging rights by owning and driving a Porsche. I get that, you're right, but it's a little bit different type of consideration altogether, in my opinion. And if that's something that really suits you, get the 911. Personally, I drove a 911 on the TT circuit in Essen, and it was mesmerizing. GT3 RS, and this might be even the best driving 911 of them all. 911 Turbo and Turbo S, and perhaps also GTS and especially GT2 are extremely powerful and also very capable. But that naturally aspirated engine that's sitting in the 911 GT3 is a dream. It revs to 9,000 plus RPMs and it sounds fantastic. It also, because it is more simple, it doesn't have turbos and all those other components, it's a lot lighter. Because it is lighter, even with the same brakes, it would brake harder, of course. As I mentioned again, the 911 with the Mazda MX-5, which is also a light, naturally aspirated car. So enough of hot hatch to more the supercars, the sports cars. But the thing is with the Mazda MX-5, it is a car that is very friendly. A lot of people like it, like them. You also have a very broad public being involved. Some of them are quite rich, but still have a 911 next to, for example. They still have a Mazda MX-5 next to, for example, 911 or Bentley or whatever, just to have some fun. Or a car for the wife or for the children that is playful and nice and still is modern and doesn't cost the world. But also people that have saved for 10 or more years to get their Mazda MX-5, but still accessible if you take that, if you're willing to make the sacrifice. You can still also, if you're at a budget, get a Mazda MX-5, either being the first generation, which is now climbing in value again because it's becoming a classic, or the NB and C generation, or even the newest one. It depends, and even if you're saving for 10 years, of course the ND that is still being sold as a new car before the new generation comes will come into your vision as well, your scope, because prices will decrease. That being said, Mazda MX-5 prices are very stable. If you compare to different type of cars that cost the same at the time of delivery. And why is that? Because it is a driving enthusiast type of car, so a lot of people want to own one, so there's quite a lot of demand, even though that there is a lot of offering of these models as well. So for a sports car there's a lot of cars also on the second-hand market, occasion market of the Mazda MX-5 type, which is great, which offers you a lot of choices for colors, interior, whatever you want, specifications. And also some people are modding them, and especially in the USA you see a lot of people modding them with superchargers or other bolt-ons. And they even have parties like BBR that are specialized at making the Mazda MX-5 even a better performer. So they have plug and play kits, as they call them. Of course you still need to do some things to make it work the way it should, but it's quite straight on. You don't have to source all components and try things out, because they already have developed something that you can just use, which is a very nice thing. I appear to have a cold. This time I'm happy that I'm not sitting into a convertible, but driving this little hot hatch. But the Mazda MX-5, I hope it will live on as long as possible, because it's a really charming little car. And also girls, wives, daughters, they like this type of car. So it's not only a boy's car. In the past they said it was a girl's car or a hairdresser car. This is just people being silly. Of course it doesn't have the raw performance, but as I mentioned, it's there for the fun, and that's its strong point. It really is such a good fun car. It is the benchmark, in my opinion, if you want an entry-level sports car. You want it to be close to the fun of the Mazda MX-5. Are there alternatives? Yes, there are at this time, but they are a lot more costly. So if you don't regard the GR86, which is at the same price level and has a little bit better performance in some areas, but does not have that open roof. And then you also have the Alpine A110, also a lightweight, perhaps 10 to 50% heavier, which is still quite a lot, but also a lot more performance is there, a lot more power, 1.8 turbo engine. And you also have the Cayman of Porsche, which is an entry-level sports car made by Porsche, which is a lot better in performance everywhere. And if you want to have the open road feeling, you could go for the Boxster, which is an open roof variety of the Cayman as we know it now. I think they called 718, and as coupe and Roadster, Spider, something like that. Those are good candidates. The Elise is no longer in production, also be a very good candidate, but also more costly. Alpine is more costly, Porsche is a lot more costly, but also the Roadster is more costly. So you're very hard pressed to have that silver lock between affordability, reliability, and still driving fun. And there, as such, the Mazda MX-5 is unchallenged at the moment, which gives you a good indication. And you could say that the GR86 offers a same level of driving fun and a lot more practicality. And you would be right, because you still have a 4-seater. Could also be a 2+2, but a little bit more room than in the 911. So that is a lot more practical, but it doesn't come with an open roof. And the open roof gives you that feeling of fun a lot more, because the wind is pulling your hair, you have direct access to sunlight, and you can feel, smell, hear things differently. Also there was the Copen. I have the Datsun Copen, which is a front wheel drive roadster type of car, real roadster as well, but comes with an aluminium roof that is electrically being applied, which is a lot better than the soft top variety that's normal in the Mazda MX-5. And it is a lot lighter again. As I mentioned, front wheel drive car, roadster can be lighter. Because this lighter can do with a smaller engine, smaller brakes, and still be performing very nicely. But that's, again, it will come back in the future as a competitor to the Mazda MX-5. In the past it was more of a K car, so a competitor to the AZ1, sorry for that, running nose. But that's something to take into consideration. That might be a good option, but still, it is not the same. It is just not the same. It will be heavier as well in the next generation, so closer to that of the Mazda MX-5, also more powerful. I really hope that it will beat the performance of the Mazda MX-5, because if so, not because I want the Mazda MX-5 to be beaten, but if you can beat the benchmark, that will result in more nice cars to be had. And the Roadster is not longer being offered in the Netherlands, so it's not for us. For us people in the Netherlands, perhaps a lot of European markets is also withdrawn. But it is a nice car, and I have the original version, first generation, but also the European spec. So also again with the 1.3 liter that they are now putting into the new one, already fitted, and the left-hand drive. So this steering wheel at a good location for European markets, and that's a great thing. I wish you a lot of pleasure. I also hope that there are plethora of Mazda MX-5, Miata, Eunos Roadster enthusiasts on the roads, because it really makes the roads a pleasant experience, and they are nice drivers as well, often quite capable because they know how to play with this type of cars, which is quite playful, and also putting driving pleasure first. Have a great day. Ciao.